Hello there. Strangely enough, I've had another Freedom of Information request response today, and this is from a request I made the best part of 3 months ago, actually, on the 4th of September 2024, and it's only just arrived, which is extraordinary. They're meant to reply in about 20 days. This request is in respect of Pseudomonas Aeruginosa. Now, there was a report that came out, I think it was The Guardian, was it? Sometimes I've lost track really exactly who broke which story when. I think it may have been The Guardian. Pseudomonas Aeruginosa, sorry if it was The Telegraph. And other people before had assumed that Pseudomonas Aeruginosa was in the mix, as it were, but it was formally reported earlier this year in one of the main newspapers as being on the taps, specifically on the taps, and found on the taps and in various times, in various, I don't know if it more than one place, but certainly more than one tap, because I think they replaced one of the taps and then they didn't replace the other tap, but they put a filter on it. But there were tests over a period of time in which it was consistently found. I've heard slightly different claims in terms of when it was first found. I've heard that it was discovered there or noted there from May 2015, going right into the spring of 2016. And elsewhere I've heard that people have said it was first discovered and found on the neonatal unit. So just to remind you, it's one of the most hospital-acquired Pseudomonas aeruginosa is one of the most lethal potential pathogens that you can have there, and apparently it produces this biofilm under which other pathogens can live and breed. So it creates this awful, deadly soup of concoction of different pathogens that can be deadly, especially to neonates that are very premature and have a lot of other health struggles and challenges at the same time. So there's differences of opinion about when it was first found. Some people said it's, February 2015. Other people say it's May, but seems to be conclusive that it was found all throughout that 2015 period and into the early spring of 2016. So effectively covering a large bulk of what they ended up calling the indictment period, i.e. June 2015 to June 2016. Anyway, I'll just get on with reading their response. It's not unexpected, but my question was, during the years 2015 and 2016, how many infants in the Countess of Chester Hospital neonatal unit were tested for Pseudomonas aeruginosa? Just as a reminder, I don't believe the presence of Pseudomonas aeruginosa came up in the 2023 trial at all, nor indeed did it come up in the retrial in 2024 in the summer. Second part of my question, which is more or less a reiteration, of those tested, i.e. the neonates tested, how many positive results were given, i.e. how many cases of Pseudomonas aeruginosa were found in the infants, so in the neonates themselves, on testing at the Countess of Chester Hospital during this time period, 2015 and 2016. So our response, it's their standard response for a lot of things to do with pathogens on the ward, on the unit. I'm just going to read bits of it through in case there are any differences. The Trust has considered this request in the context of the ongoing current legal processes concerning the Trust's neonatal services and does not intend to disclose any such information held by the Trust for the reasons given below. Is the Thirlwall inquiry a legal process? I suppose it is, in some regard. Is it? They use another term a bit later on. I'm assuming they're meaning that they're talking about the Thirlwall inquiry there as a legal process. Of course, it kind of opens them up to the question, well, if on testing of the neonates during this period of time, if there were no positive results, you'd want to say that, wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you say it? That might be a misreading. They might just be doing this blanket, we're not going to say anything about it. But nonetheless, they know that that's a news story about Pseudomonas A, and if they could positively say, okay, we found it on the taps, but it was never found on any of the patients, i.e. the neonates, across this time period, would they not say that? Would they not make that explicit? Well, they don't seem to want to be doing that here. They're neither. I see this as one of those instances of saying, well, we neither confirm nor deny. Well, we're neither confirming there were any cases in terms of positive testing of the infants, of the neonates, but we're not saying there wasn't either. We're not talking about it. It makes me suspicious personally. I suspect it may make others suspicious that they're hiding aspects here in terms of what may be on the medical notes. Had it been on the medical notes of the neonates specific to the indictment, then you would have thought the defence would have seen that and made much of it in the trial. And they don't appear to have mentioned it at all. But that doesn't mean it didn't happen. That doesn't mean that it could apply to some of the other deaths across those 2 years. Or, I've got to keep saying this, how reliable is anything coming from this hospital, and thereby anything coming from the NHS in terms of reliability of response, if they can't even produce the figures for mortality in a reliable fashion, which they certainly cannot and have not, then how reliable are they in any respect whatsoever about any question that's being asked of them? It goes on to say the Trust relies, it goes on about the Section 31 of the Freedom of Information Act, not disclosing information. There are ongoing criminal investigations and processes following on from the conviction of Lucy Letby. What are these ongoing criminal investigations then? I think they've just got this there in the background. It's very useful for them just to say whether there are ongoing criminal investigations or not, whether they're active, whether they're live. It doesn't seem to matter. They can just revert to this and say, well, we're not going to say anything because they exist somewhere. Maybe nothing is actively happening about them, but we'll just use this as a reason to stay stum about everything really that we can do. The information requested may be of relevance to those investigations and processes. Well, the only way that they would be of relevance, would they not, if they're of relevance to it, in terms of a criminal investigation, would be exculpatory, wouldn't it, of Lucy Letby, i.e. that another reason why there was this apparent or alleged spike in deaths. And I know that's under contention as well, that it was a spike relative to other hospitals. Perhaps it was relative to the 2 or 3 years previous. But going back further in time, that's another open question and something I'm trying to get to the bottom of. But they're, again, making it very difficult to find out reliable information, i.e. the hospital are. So, just to read over that again, the information requested may be of relevance to the processes. So the processes could be the legal processes, the Wall inquiry. The people who write these responses here may be using these terms interchangeably, may not be using the language specifically or with great clarity, may not be using them with great clarity. But it's putting out there the potential for the presence or absence of Pseudomonas aeruginosa in terms of a positive test or otherwise, i.e. no positive tests, of those neonates across this period of time as being something which may be relevant, may be of relevance to the investigations. I mean, that says to me that it could be a false inference I could make. One could make a false inference that means, yeah, we know there were positive tests. Otherwise, we couldn't say it could be of any relevance to the investigation. I suppose another way you could look at it is that in either way it's of relevance to the investigation. So it's either potentially exculpatory or works for the position of the defence, if you will, or if there were positive tests. In other words, if Pseudomonas aeruginosa was rampant on that unit, and they've either hidden the evidence or they've just not shown it, they didn't show it to the defence, etc., etc. But it does make you wonder, and it begs the question, if that is the right phrase to use, it begs the question, well, if you know there weren't any positive tests of neonates for Pseudomonas aeruginosa, why wouldn't you say that? Why wouldn't you make that public? It kind of makes you think, well, it sounds like there probably were them, doesn't it? I know you can't infer that with any absolute surety or certainty at all. I get that. But it kind of gives you this, it kind of pushes you in that direction. That's what it does for me anyway, at the very least. At this stage, it goes on to say, the Trust considers that any disclosure of the information requested into the public domain would be likely to prejudice the ongoing criminal processes. So they're using all these terms interchangeably. There's criminal investigations and there's processes. There's legal processes, and then there's ongoing criminal processes. And they all seem to be, they're kind of a bit of a mush between them all, being used interchangeably. Legal processes, criminal processes, and criminal investigations. Are criminal investigations and processes synonymous with? Are they the same thing? Is a process the same as an investigation? Is a legal process the same as an investigation? I don't know. It's kind of jargon, isn't it? But the bottom line is that they don't want you to know anything about either the presence of positive tests or the absence of positive tests on neonates across 2015 and 2016 in respect of Pseudomonas aeruginosa. There's a last little bit here. The Trust acknowledges that the information requested is likely to be of public interest and that it may be in the public interest for some information requested to be disclosed, for some of the information requested to be disclosed. So it's acknowledged that, has it? Well, which bit of the sum then? Which sum of it have they given me? One, they've given me none. It is likely that such information, this is just all copy and paste stuff, I realise. I've had it with probably about half a dozen other ones. It is likely that such information will be disclosed into the public domain at some point during the criminal and current inquiry processes. So they're talking about criminal and current inquiry processes as though they're going on sort of related, but they're on two tracks. Subject to any restrictions on disclosure or publication. This is lawyers written this, isn't it? Or told them how to draft it. On publication that may be put in place by the courts or inquiry. Okay, yes, subject to any restrictions. However, at this stage, the Trust considers that preventing prejudice to the ongoing investigation processes. They've had every combination of this. Maybe I'm making too much of this. Investigation process, criminal process, criminal investigations and processes, legal processes. All these different terms that kind of seem to blend into each other, or may perhaps are synonymous to a degree, or very much synonymous. The bottom line is they just don't want to tell you anything about it. It makes me suspicious that there is more there. And even if there is more there, I'd be very suspicious about them potentially covering up information that they hold. I think they're already doing that in respect of mortality figures. I suspect that. I don't know it. I suspect that based on communications I've had with them. The Trust considers that preventing prejudice to the ongoing investigation processes, I've read that, by the non-disclosure of such information outweighs the public interest in disclosure. So that's kind of a bit of a formulaic get-out clause. It seems to be suggesting that there are potential further criminal investigations. It doesn't limit that to, or doesn't name of whom, investigations of whom. They've floated it out there. Evans has floated it out there. Even Breary at Thirlwall kind of floats it out there that they believe other crimes were committed prior to the so-called indictment period. But that's, as I think I've said before, is a strategy that they're using, because they know that all the convictions and all the substance of the prosecution's case is being demolished over these last months, and many people are realising that there is essentially no evidence at all against Lucy Letby. Not that it's shaky, not that it's weak, not that it's got holes, but there is no evidence against her whatsoever. And they know this. And that's why Evans, in an interview, or several interviews, and then even Breary at the Thirlwall, suggests, there's other crimes that surely happened before, and you've got this matter of the 25 further so-called cases that Evans was meant to have found, or says that he found, tells us that he found them. There's a curiosity over those as well, which I brought up on Twitter some time ago, is that in the New Yorker article, that came out in May, wasn't it? He said in that article, he is said by the journalist to have told Rachel that he sent these 25 supplementary, i.e. further 25 suspicious incidents to the police in 2018, after receiving a second batch from the Countess of Chester Hospital. And when we say that, we obviously mean Stephen Breary, probably with some help from a few other people. That's the chain, that's how it works. It goes from Breary to the police to Evans. He writes back to the police. This is what he told the New Yorker for the article in 2018, after his earlier reports, in which he found 15 cases out of 33. He says he finds another 25 suspicious cases, suspicious of deliberate harm, out of 28 cases he's found. I'm assuming cases means individual patients, individual babies, but it's hard to tell because, again, these terms are not being used with accuracy and they're not being used in the same way at all times by the same people. So they're kind of floating signifiers, as I think the term goes. We don't know exactly what they're referring to. We don't know what a case is necessarily when in the way that they use these words. Is a case, could 3 cases be 3 incidents, 3 crashes for the same baby? Or does it have to be 3 separate neonates involved if you say 3 cases? It's all very loose language. But I'm moving off the track there, because what I was going to say is Evans tells the New Yorker in May, or whenever they actually did the interview, that he gives these 25 cases which end up going nowhere, or thus far anyway, and we're 6-7 years down the line now. So in 6 or 7 years, they don't end up on any indictment, they don't end up on any charges. He tells... he says that happened in 2018. And yet Dr. Philip Hammond in the Private Eye says that when he spoke, and he spoke either through email, whatever the exchange is, I believe they had an email exchange, possibly on the phone, I don't know, but he's been talking with Evans, Dr. Philip Hammond has been, and Dr. Phil Hammond says that Evans told him that he found 25 cases in 2023. Now, it's a big difference, isn't there? There's 5 years difference there. Does he mean there's a further 25 cases? So on top of all the cases that end up going into the indictment, i.e. 15 from Evans and 2 found by Dr. Z.A. / Breary, i.e. the smoking gun cases, smoking gun alleged poisoning cases, insulin poisoning, which are found, well, we first thought Breary found them, but apparently it was Dr. Z.A. that flagged them up, and then Breary gets that information, holds on to it for a year, and then appears to find them freshly himself. So we've got that issue as well. But we've got this situation where Evans has told 2 separate people, and Dr. Philip Hammond obviously is a doctor, but he was in his capacity as a journalist here. So Evans has told 2 separate journalists that he's found 25 supplementary cases, none of which end up with a charge or an indictment, or on any indictment, or in that court case last year or the one this year. The same number, 25, 5 years apart. That's how mad it is. I flagged it up on Twitter some weeks ago. I flagged it up to Dr. Phil Hammond. I didn't get any response. And in other words, I said to him, do you think this is a further 25 cases? I.e., are there 50 cases that Evans finds, quote unquote, finds of suspicious harm, that the police ignore 50 instances of it? Or is he telling 2 journalists the same story but putting them 5 years apart? Either way, it's a complete basket case, isn't it? Obviously, we know it is anyway. I'll leave it there. I didn't get any response from Dr. Phil Hammond about that. I don't know if he saw it. It seems pretty interesting to me, particularly because Dr. Phil Hammond in Private Eye made a point about these 25 cases. In other words, the police do nothing with them, don't end up as charges. So what does that say for Evans's prediction ability, or analysis ability of ascertaining likely or actual deliberate harm taking place, if he can get it wrong essentially 25 times? And if we're to believe that he also did that in 2018 as well as 2023, as he got it wrong 50 times after apparently getting it 100% right according to the prosecution and the legal system, the justice system, 15 times out of 33, which is his 15 picks, as it were, out of 33 cases that he was sent in 2017. So he can get 15 right, and they're all perfectly right. Then he can get potentially 2 lots of 25 completely wrong, and yet he's meant to be some kind of a reliable expert that all the other experts follow his lead essentially. and the prosecution build their case around him more than anything else. And there we are. So I hope you can see it on the screen. I hope the writing's not too small. And I'll leave it there. And thank you for listening. And I am waiting for other Freedom of Information request responses, particularly in relation to mortality rates over an extended period of time, the best part of 20 years, which is, I think that's something that's not been looked at across that kind of length of time. I'm hoping to hear something sensible. So far I've received something which is very much not sensible, and I've queried it, and I'm waiting for responses from the hospital, basically. Anyway, take care, all the best, keep warm, look after yourselves. Bye-bye. Bye.